there's still so much more I want to do and learn about myself, and challenges that I have set that I haven't been able to take on yet. And if I didn't stay the course, then I probably have large amounts of regret in my life. And I don't want to live like that. Who the hell wants to live like that?
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
And we're back. Hi everyone, it's great to be back for the next season of this podcast, and boy, what a journey it has been. I've been very grateful to have so many life-changing chats, and I'm very excited to get back into it and chat with so many amazing people. As some of you are wondering, why did I rob the world of not releasing more podcasts in the last month or so? I hear you, and your grave concerns are indeed valid. I wanted a little break to keep fresh for the next season. Believe it or not, this podcast series has been going on since early 2019. I'm super appreciative of all of you who listen, share, and engage with me, and of course, the brave souls who sign up to chat with me. Anyway, the podcast is not going away, and for me to know what's really working well in this podcast, it would be awesome if you could please share feedback, takeaways, or insights, or just simply why you enjoyed the podcast. The easiest way to connect is to comment on the blue picture of each guest on the Funny and Failure Instagram page. Otherwise, you can DM me. Sharing your insights is a great way for me to get to know you better, as well as help grow and develop the podcast series. Also, sharing stories, posts, and podcasts helps keep this podcast series alive. It could potentially be the best season yet. I'm so excited. So let's get into this one, which is perhaps could be one of my favorites. Today's guest, Desmin Borges, is a beautiful and deep-thinking soul who places great value on community and family. I love his empathy and team-working approach. And to top it all, he was so easy and friendly to talk to. Chatting with him made me acknowledge that we're all in this world journey together, and perhaps we could all learn to acquire deeper empathy and kindness towards each other, especially those people who have differing opinions to us. So let's officially introduce Desmin to the podcast. Desmin Borges is an actor who takes on challenging roles and brings dynamic characters to life. He's perhaps best known for his role as Edgar in 5 seasons of FX unromantic comedy You're the Worst. The Twisted series took a modern look at love and happiness through 4 people who haven't been successful at either. Desmin can currently be seen in a series regular role in HBO's The Time Traveler's Wife, as well as in a season-long reoccurring arc on the Fox comedy Welcome to Flatch. Other recent credits include Amazon series Utopia, opposite John Cusack, the Netflix dramedy series Living with Yourself as Paul Rudd's nemesis, and the film Private Life opposite Paul Giamatti and Catherine Hahn. Upcoming work includes a major role opposite Jennifer Lopez in the film Shotgun Wedding. Desmin first gained recognition for his breakout performance in The Elaborate Entrance of Chad Deity, performed at Chicago's Victory Gardens, New York's Second Stage, and the Geffen Playhouse in LA, which we dive a little bit into. He's also received the Joseph Jefferson Award and Theatre World Award, and nominations for the Lucille, Lortel, and Drama League Awards. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, such as why New York is better than LA, food, haters, losing his father at 15 and moving forward, pain, health and happiness, and being a voice to the voiceless. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's epic episode.
Oh, this could be a good way to start, actually. I've got like 20 places of where we can start. But maybe tell me about hashtag Foodie Fridays.
Oh, hashtag Foodie Friday. That's like an oldie but a goodie, because I haven't really I gotta say my involvement in Instagram has thoroughly exhausted itself. And it's not because of me. It's because of all the assholes that are on the internet, like, and if you're listening and you're one of these people, quit being so damn salty about everything. Like, you don't have to, like, throw your 140 character blurb about why you hate something that I've posted all the time. Like, chill out, man. If you don't like it, just move on with your life.
Exactly.
No, but and in general, I'm a big I'm a big food person. I've always said since I started being focused on doing this acting thing, which was around 15, 16, when I really got like laser focused about it, that if I wasn't successful in my terms of being successful by the time I was 40, which we're getting closer and closer to that mark, that I would stop acting and I would go to culinary school.
I didn't
And
know
I would become a chef. And when the whole Instagram thing, like, really, and my platform, quote unquote, if you can't see me, I know that's a cringeworthy word, but I was trying to engage the things with people and followers that they might be interested in, that I was definitely interested in, to kind of steer it away from just like, hey, I'm doing this show, or hey, this thing's coming out. It's kind of like, well, what can we talk about and interact as humans on this social media site that we all can just like really get excited about? And for me, that's food, pictures of food, talking about food, recipes, things like that. So I started hashtag Foodie Friday. And it started out with me taking pictures of stuff that I was cooking, or going, or places that I would go out to eat that I thought was like really special. And then from there, it just kind of like transformed. And, I want to say I've lately, probably since around the pandemic started, just kind of started pushing other people, smaller joints, people that are starting to do like food trucks or things like that necessarily don't have a grand following, or they do, and then I just discover it and I'm like, yo, this looks amazing, and then I went there and tried it and it was fucking spectacular. Like, go check this place out, hashtag Foodie Friday. So that's kind of what it's transformed into.
That is awesome. I've written down already 100 points, and I already had 100 points before. That's such a nice way to engage with people. I don't have the magic formula, but as you said, there's a lot of hate, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it can be very common as an actor or anyone. Hey, I'm doing this, and there's not that engagement. But when you're actually showing a passion of yours, which is very clear, that's a nice way to also promote other people, which I love.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't love the spotlight being on me all the time. Some people who are in the spotlight thrive on being in the spotlight all the time. I feel like there's places for it where I engage and I accept it, and I, get myself to the place where I need to be in that spotlight. But most of the time, like, I've always been a guy that I like to kind of go away. I like my private time and I like to do other things, which is one of the main reasons why I moved to New York and not to LA super early on. It's because in LA, I feel like the entire city is inundated by this profession, being in and around this profession, the people you could know in this profession. What can you do for me lately is what I feel like LA is. In New York, it's not. I mean, I would argue to say that maybe the financial sector is probably like top, or maybe marketing or fashion or something is top dog in New York, but it's not, the end all be all. You can walk around in New York City and go to a different neighborhood and not run into anybody who's an actor, a director, or a writer, and get to know them. They could be an artist, they could be an architect, and you're just kind of chatting with people being people. And that's always first and foremost what I've been interested in, just like as a human, chatting with people and getting to know people for being people outside of what their career path might be.
That is beautiful. And we've heard about some of the downfalls of LA, and everyone's got their downfalls, but I like that you bring it up in a very eloquent way. So you're not the type of guy that will walk in and be like, hey guys, Desmond's here. It's so nice that you can, you know, but actually on that, I heard you talk about community. And I know that you were raised in Chicago, and from what I've heard from you and also other people on this podcast, and I'm not shitting on LA, but you grew up with a strong community values, and LA doesn't quite foster that. It's a different environment, and New York is probably a bit more suited towards that value of yours.
Yeah, I don't think LA was built to have the onslaught of community that a Chicago has, that a New York City has, right? Like you are forced to ride the train and do public transportation
Sure.
in New York City specifically with people of all walks of life, right? Like in LA, it wasn't necessarily set up like that. Everyone gets to be in like their bubble in their car for the most part. And you basically find your community and then travel to and from that. Where in New York City, you're just all on the same sort of energy wavelength all the time because you're all basically on top of each other. So I there are plenty of amazing people that I've met in Los Angeles, in the state of California. Like I love the state of California. It's a beautiful, beautiful state. And I enjoy interacting with those people, and I love my people that are there. But when I'm there, Cash said this the best that I've ever heard it. I don't feel like I'm my best self when I'm in LA.
Interesting.
That's how I still feel. And she said this probably in, I don't know, one of our first group You're the Worst interviews. How long ago was that now? Like, man, we're almost coming to a decade of when the pilot was filmed, right?
That's crazy.
2013 or something like that. So super early on. And like that stuck with me. And I just like, I watched it from afar. And I don't feel like I'm my best version of myself when I'm in LA. I don't know why. Maybe I succumb to to whatever the allure, the draw is of being sucked into the machine. But I'm not. And in New York and in Chicago specifically, I feel like I am. I feel like I'm with my people, and I can feel like I just can be Desmond in my skin a little bit more easily.
That's so great. But what I'm hearing, which is even like greater, is that you're all about authenticity and authentic connections, and perhaps in like different environments when it's all about the hustle and maybe getting the job, and it's just that's the only focus. You're saying like in New York, for example, that you're not just an actor, you're a more well-rounded whole human individual, and that's a strong aspect of you, but there's more to you than you. Whereas perhaps in other environments, acting's the only point that people really care about, which is really interesting, like dynamic, because we are all so many different things. And I would like to know maybe from the acting point of view, because I know that you went to theater school when you were young and that was extremely important to you, that sometimes we can define ourselves as purely the actor. I am the actor.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go through that, or did you always realize that there's more to Desmond than just acting?
Yeah. I mean, I would be lying if I said that there weren't periods of my life where I was like, I am the actor, hear me roar,
Yeah.
But when in the midst of searching for acting schools in general, because once I turned 15, so just to back up a little bit, my father got diagnosed with colon cancer when I was 14. I was living in Houston, Texas at the time. We had moved from Chicago to Houston when I was 10. And it was a really, really rough time in general. I mean, like obviously that was a difficult time, but I was also like 14 years old trying to become an individual in this high school sort of society, because high school is just a smaller version of what society actually is, right? And so there was a lot of pushing and pulling that I had to do within myself at that time. And, it was only 10 months later that he passed. It was
Oh, wow.
the cancer was fairly aggressive. And so I was 15 and I was playing basketball and I was playing baseball. And I always thought, we were lower middle class. So me going to any sort of college would have to be helping funds, whether that, came in the form of scholarship or financial aid or anything like that. So I always thought baseball was going to take me there. I was always pretty good at baseball, and that was mine and my dad's thing. And then he passed, and I was like, I don't want to do that without him. Not that I didn't love baseball anymore, but it really lost its luster almost instantaneously to me.
Yeah.
And I was always in theater, always involved, in the drama club in high school because they called it drama in high school. Uh, and then I got laser focused. I started auditioning for community theaters in Houston outside of school. I got an agent. I started taking voice classes and
Wow.
dance classes, just trying to, really basically wrap myself around what this focus was going to be to kind of not pay attention to all the hurt that was happening inside this little boy's head.
Yeah.
And from there, so I started looking at schools and things like that. And I always said and I remember writing this in like, when you have to write like an essay to the school to say why you want to go there. I remember saying that I wanted to find a place that would help me round out as a human just as much as it would help me round out myself as an artist.
Wow.
And there was 3 schools in Chicago that I auditioned for, 3 schools in New York. I knew I either wanted to be there or there. Chicago was home. It felt like home. And I walked into, the old theater school. They have a brand new, beautiful one off Fullerton Avenue, but this was the old one that, John C. Reilly had gone through, and Joe Mantegna and Gillian Anderson, and, Elizabeth Banks. No, I'm sorry. Elizabeth Perkins.
Still
Didn't mean to.
heavyweights.
Yeah, still all, and it's like I walked in there and I felt, oh, this is where I belong. Not to mention across the street was St. Vincent de Paul's Church, where I was baptized. And 2 blocks away was Seton Hall, where was a dorm then, but about 20 years ago, my dad was a cook there for the nuns because
Oh,
it used
wow.
to be like like the nuns used to live there. So there were a lot of connections and a lot of ties that I hadn't even really thought about when I was going through my process. But I felt like that place made me feel the most comfortable and gave me the most opportunity to be the best Desmin I could be in and out of, the acting community.
That is still so rare, and especially at a young age, to even say the word like a well-rounded human. And especially like we can we'll see how we go, but just change like that when you're a young person, you're moving to a different state. Obviously, losing your father is just like the hardest thing ever. You then decide to actually use probably like the positive forward momentum. Please correct me if I'm wrong, to actually like try and empower yourself. Where so many people, no judgment whatsoever, will go the other way and do things that aren't for their best. But you actually had such a strong mind. And I just find that crazy. How did you even like think like that? You could have just let the pain and hurt take over you, and that's understandable.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, like it was instantaneous. Like after it happened, I logistically thought to myself, and I think this is just naturally me, my Desmond brain thought, oh, my dad worked almost 2 jobs his whole life. Where's that money coming in from? They're like things that we need, right? My mom's a professional barber her entire life. They're capped, right? I mean, unless if you, start doing, hair to the stars or something like that, where you're constantly traveling, that she wasn't doing that. So logistically speaking, I know that I needed gas for the car that I inherited, which was a Blurple Dodge Neon. That was my dad's. I needed money to like be able to go out with my friends. I needed money to be able to, go to these auditions that I was going to. These things were necessary in order for me to move forward. So I also got a job once at Chick-fil-A when I was, 15 shortly after. And then I moved over to Mount Tasia Family Fun Center, where I was like doing go-karts and
Oh,
video game tickets and
cool.
shit like that. Yeah. I mean, but I knew that logistically I needed to be of use of this way in order for my family, my mom and I, to sort of stay afloat. And my mom did an incredible job pulling her end, and then I did as much as I could on my end. So, I was working, I was auditioning, I was doing theater inside, doing theater outside, as well as having a job while I was trying to complete high school. And yeah, I was lucky enough to have that sort of logistical focus that you're right. I stayed away from going down any sort of dark, deep rabbit hole of pain or ominous sort of choices, I would say.
I want to really dive into that because I'm just so that's just so awesome to you, and obviously your upbringing and community values as well. And just as a side point, I think you said you were living with so many different like cousins at any given time, which
Yeah.
is so hopefully that they all instilled those values in you. But also in terms of like when shit hits the fan, if and excuse me, that's not the right way of saying it, like money's not coming in,
Mhm.
acting's not the safest job. And so it could be very easy, especially in that environment, to go, you know what, this might not actually pay the bills. I'm going to
Mhm.
have to get inverted commas a real job. But you still had, at such a young age, this is crazy, that you had that determination, you're going to look out for your family, which is when you're going through grief and everything that's going, and also you're evolving into an adult, but you still had that focus on acting. Was it just like, I know this is part of me. I am an actor, and you just knew it within you? It was like a deep knowing.
I'm a, I knew that I really enjoyed it. I knew that I found it challenging as well as fulfilling, and I knew that it was something that I was good at. I mean, I'm a very competitive person, especially with myself. Like no one is harder on me than me, and no one can challenge me as hard as I can challenge myself. But I knew very early on that there was something about acting that clicked with me. But I also had a variety of musicians in my mom's family and my dad's family. So it wasn't like performing was, second tier, right? I don't think if I had said to my mom, "Oh, I'm going to go to law school," she might have been like, "That's a lot of money and a lot of years in school. That's going to be a lot of loans. If that's really what you want to do, go right ahead. We'll sign up, we'll figure it out, and we'll do it." But I said acting, which was somewhat the entertainment industry is somewhat familiar to my family and somewhat sort of safe, right? Because the thing
Interesting.
is coming from a blue collar family, like also having a job as a cater waiter or a hairdresser or something of that sort to kind of help ends meet when you're not doing the acting thing is something that my family and extensions of my family are very used to. And I always knew that I could make ends meet, specifically in Chicago, where, I mean, now, not just current inflation, but over the last few years, Chicago's like really blown up and is way more expensive than it used to be. But you could get by. You could get by and make do. And, I mean, I grew up with the family that I grew up in, and I saw that we always had food on the table. I always had clothes, new clothes on my body. If my shoes were worn out, we found a way to, get me new shoes. Like, so it didn't seem like so far fetched that like, oh man, acting's this thing where you're just yeah, you're just
Like
going to be
outside of you.
a poor actor your whole life. I'd already been a poor person my whole life, so like you just add actor to it, it's not that much different.
Yeah.
you know so why not be happy at what you're doing, even if it's bringing in little money, than being incredibly unhappy what you're doing and making the same amount of nothing. Was always kind of the thought process I had.
That's really cool. But even like understanding happiness, and I know that I'm really harping on this, like for me in my community, it was like doctor, lawyer, accountant. And there was no
Hmm.
real conversation about happiness. It's just earn a lot of money, you'll be safe and secure. And then you can kind of worry about happiness later. But the conversations that you're having, which is way better than the ones that I'm having, it's kind of realizing that happiness is the success in itself. And that's it's a completely different way of looking at it. So I love hearing these different stories because I don't think we quite had it right in terms of what is happiness and how does it relate to success.
Yeah, well, I mean, I also got taught the hard way that it could all just be gone in a matter of whenever whatever it is, whatever you believe, whenever it is ready for you, it's there. Like there's there's no fighting it, right? So I understand, like logically speaking, like I'm a dad now, and so I know at some point I'm going to have this conversation with either my son or my daughter, right? And we'll go through it. We'll weigh the pros and the cons. If what they love, matches up with something that's sensible, I want them to do what makes them happy first and foremost, and then we'll figure everything else out. But, like if I took, the point of view um, that you went through, like I also know that there may not be the later. Like I have a very visceral understanding of like there may not be later. So you could save all this money or, become an accountant and be incredibly, safe. But like that doesn't mean you're going to be safe in life. Right.
Right.
And so, trying to, it's like anything else, like weighing like the risk reward in any scenario. It's, the same sort of deal.
Very wise words. And you're right. Like, we don't know how long we've got in a sense, and why it doesn't make any sense to me now that I've gone to screenwriting and doing podcasts, in that I was an accountant as well. In that, yes, I've been through it all. It doesn't make any sense that you would focus on a future thing when you're not experiencing now. You can build up towards that future thing, but doing something and you're like, oh, I'll eventually be better in the future, it doesn't actually make much logical sense in terms of happiness to me. The goal is to achieve or strive for the happiness now, not wait, well, if I get this and then I get that and then I'll have the happiness. And it can also be similar to an acting mentality, actually, in terms of, oh, if I get this role, then I'll be able to do this role, then I can do that role, but then it will really take you out of the craft. You're nodding, so tell me your words of wisdom.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I have found in my experience, and my journey's very different than anybody else's journey. But the thing that I think that's going to be the break or the big thing that propels me to something else usually turns out not to be the thing, right? It's like it's these other things along the way, the happy accidents, the unexpected things in your life that find you in places of where you really want to be. And I've really come to understand that auditioning, right? Like we've really, I started doing basically only self tapes right around 2016. I've gone in a couple of times, but at that point, pardon me, I'm drinking a little bubbly water,
I
and
didn't hear
it
anything, so
popped on up. No, so yeah, so I started doing those, and they slowly started becoming accepted before they became the norm. So I really got to hone my abilities, right, and what I thought was me presenting the best product to my manager and agent for them to send over to casting. And so, um, in this world of figuring it out, I started noticing that I thought I was doing really, really strong shit. And even if I didn't get it, there was a weird thing that like this casting director or this studio would come around later, or this writer would come back around and be like, hey, we remembered you from that. We loved it. You weren't right for that, which is like 95% of the job when you think about it. Like hearing no doesn't mean that you suck. Hearing no means not this time, right? And hopefully if you do your work, which I pride myself on doing, they come back around for something else. And I found that the thing that they come back around for something else tends to be the thing that's more fruitful for me personally than like, oh man, I'm going to do this. Like my first major motion picture was Mr. Popper's Penguins with Jim Carrey. Like Jim Carrey, huge influence on my life. I mean, I was like 11, 12 years old when Ace Ventura came out. My friends were talking literally out of our ass to each other all of the time. And here I am, in New York City. I moved with this hip hop satire called The Elaborate Entrance of Chad Deity that was a huge hit in Chicago, came to second stage in New York, was very critically acclaimed. It's the wrestling play, right? And then all of a sudden, that's the last play that I did. It's the last play that I've done because my film and television career then kind of took ownership of me. It wasn't that I chose not to do theater anymore because I love being in the theater, but all of these experiences and opportunities that I didn't have prior to this play just started being kind of thrown at me through auditioning. It wasn't like I was getting straight offers or anything, but they were there, and it was something I'd been waiting for. So I took it. You know, if the ball's rolling, you don't stop the momentum of the ball. You let the ball scoop you up, and you keep rolling with the ball until it stops by itself. So I did that, and I was there, and I thought, oh my God, I'm in a fucking movie with Jim Carrey. This is it. I'm just going to start doing studio movies all the time. Just call me Studio Des, right? Probably one of those moments where I thought, like, I'm actor, hear me roar. Not that it's probably other than You're the Worst, the second thing that has been viewed most that I have been in my repertoire of shit on IMDb page, on my IMDb page, right? But it's not like all of a sudden like studios were calling me up, you know? So like it was a monumental moment for me. I was hanging out with someone that I had looked up to and adored for such a long time. He was absolutely fantastic on set. Like so dialed in, so specific, great at like throwing things out and giving suggestions and playing with each other. And if anything, I realized, this was a sponge moment, right? I'm soaking up everything I can from working with Jim Carrey, and I'm going to use this later on. And maybe I'll impart some of that on a younger actor at some point when I'm sort of in the similar sort of position. But this is a moment for me to learn as well as to work at the same time. And that's what it, turned out to be. And a lot of the other things that have like really propelled me forward, no one thought You're the Worst was going to be good.
Oh, really?
We thought it was going to be great. The people at FX thought that it had the possibility, but none of us were famous. Aya, Chris, Kether, and myself were basically all in the same sort of atmosphere in our careers. We were coming out at the exact same time as, what was it called? Nat Faxon and Judy Greer were headlining the show. And I dug the show. I dug their show, and I really dug them because we were doing a lot of press with them because both shows came out at the same time, and we were, they would go first and then we would be after. And so, and Judy Greer also went to the theater school at DePaul University. So like there was connections that were happening there, and we were really enjoying it, but no one was banking on You're the Worst being the more popular of that 1 hour time block, and then having the longevity that it had compared to that show. Like, we all loved the writing. We all knew what was clicking. We had, Nicole Clemens was like our head producer at the time, and she absolutely fucking loved everything that was going on. Eric Schreier, John Landgraf, like they really dug everything that Steven was putting down and that putting down on the page, and that we were elevating, once we were shooting it. But no one really thought like, oh, this is gonna pop. And it did. And, I can even argue that I don't think we got enough of a chance to pop as much as I think any of us thought we probably should. Like, if you go through that cast list,
crazy.
The recurrings that we have, the guest stars that we had on that show, almost anybody on that show could have their own television show, from like 1 to like 35 on that cast list. And the writing was so phenomenal. The directing was, we were working with folks like Matt Shackman, Jordan Vogt Roberts, Stephen Falk, who, was the creator, was also directing and doing a phenomenal job. We had, Mike Berlucci as our DP. You couldn't have like captured East Los Angeles, like that sort of hipstery groove, any better. And I still got to say, I think we were always like underdogs the entire time. And I think people slept on us, and they shouldn't have. But that's my own beef. That
I completely. It's really interesting. It was a great show. I watched it, but in terms of the And you're right, with like the content, it was different. The way that you brought up like more serious themes and you had that dark comedy element, so good. And we could probably talk about this for 10 hours. But one of the many things that you said that really caught my eye is the comparing. And we've had people on Seinfeld, we've had people on these massive shows like yours, and mentally, and there's no right or wrong, like when you come off a big show, it can you can compare the next thing that you're doing to that show. You can also think, like as you alluded to, that once you've done this, you're going to be in the biggest thing in the world, and sometimes you might go inverted commas backwards or sideways or whatever your view is. And it's like a mental game then. After coming from huge success, you've honed in on your craft, you learned from so many people. What was going on, if you can remember, around that time, or if you've had to work on it?
Yeah, you know, I mean, success is a funny thing, and I've learned to measure my success by my standards of success, nobody else's,
Nice.
which is not something that's necessarily easy or given. It's something that you have to think about, right? And be committed to. So, yeah, I remember exactly what was happening, like it was yesterday, because it was such like a huge turning point in my life. Like I grew up with these people, like my now wife and I went on our first date 3 weeks before I shot that pilot.
Oh, wow.
We got married while I was doing that show. We had my
Kids.
son while I was doing that show. We bought a home while I was doing that show. I turned into an adult while I was doing that show. You know, there was so many amazing milestones that happened within my life that once that show was ending, it was pretty sad.
Of course.
Be, um, I mean, all projects have their end date, but you know, it was, you know, really capping off what was the end of an era of probably like the highest like 5 years of my life until then, right? And so we're auditioning, seeing what new stuff is coming on, what might I fall into, what might be interesting at this point. Because it's funny when you start going in for these meetings, they're like, what are you interested in?
Oh,
What type, you know, and it wasn't like that before. It was like, well, you're just lucky if we cast you in this. Get over here and fall in line, kid. uh, and I, you know, I remember thinking like, shit, I don't know what I want to do. I just want to do something different than Edgar, right? Like whatever it is, I want to do something different than Edgar for me as like as an artistic challenge. I didn't really, you know, there's only so many Daniel Day-Lewis's out there, you know, most actors deal with degrees of separation between projects, between roles. There's not everyone is like a wild genius chameleon that can have the time, the availability, or the, you know, like intrinsic uh, artistic whatever he's got to just be completely different and in something for like 6 months to a year
Yeah, it's crazy.
at a time. I mean, I wish that I had that, but I just don't think that's necessarily Desmond's acting, makeup, style, ability, whatever you want to say, right?
Yep.
So I just knew I wanted it to be different. And then all of a sudden, Living with Yourself with Paul Rudd on Netflix came up, and Jonathan Dayton and Valerie Ferris were directing it. And I mean, their stuff is just so beautifully shot and just so gut wrenching, even though it's like opportunistic for the most part. You know, like they show the human existence in all sort of forms, you know, within their films, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, I jumped on it. Did I, you know, I wasn't quite sure if that was like the complete departure from Edgar that I wanted to go, but I know that, you know, he wasn't a vet dealing with PTSD and insomnia, and he wasn't, you know, freeloading off of his best friend living in the
I think
bottom
he
of his house
food and
anymore.
yep.
Yeah, right. So it was enough of a change for me. Plus, I would be working with Paul Rudd, another person who I have long admired from afar. Like he
And
is.
twice
Oh,
because you're working.
right,
Yep, that's a very
right.
fat joke. Sorry for cutting you off.
No, no,
Okay,
no.
Paul
You're
Rudd's. Yeah, yeah, go on.
yeah,
That's it.
yeah, twice. But I had also worked with Paul Rudd and Paul Giamatti on a different film called All Is Bright years ago. Um, so it was just kind of it was an amazing it was an amazing opportunity. And then from there it was like, well, where are we going next? And all of a sudden, Utopia fell in my lap. I got the audition. I remember watching the first two episodes of the original and falling madly in love with what they were
Oh, how
doing
nice.
and having to pull myself out of it because if I wanted to forge my own Wilson, I couldn't have watched anymore because a deal so fantastic in it that it's like when you're doing Shakespeare, like how many people have done Mercutio and how many times have I seen people do Mercutio? I still want my own version of it.
Yep, your
I
skin.
wanted to honor what they did, respect it, live in it, but create my own version of it. And I thought then that I had found really the next like really big juicy thing for me. It was artistically in a direction that I wanted to go in. I was working with people that I gifted beyond belief. I mean, David Rubin was casting Gillian Flynn wrote all the episodes and was show running. We basically had an entire female team producing. It was one of the smoothest sets that I had ever been on. John Cusack as a Chicago boy, you don't get much more iconic than John Cusack, and then Rainn Wilson, where if you know me, you know how much of an Office fan I am. I think Dwight Schrute is like one of my all-time favorite comedic characters. So to be working with them and Sasha and Dan and Ashley and Juana, like it was just, it seemed like such the perfect fit. But most importantly, like artistically speaking, like I got to do something I've never done before. I put on 35 pounds for this character. I
Oh, wow.
wanted him to feel like I remember people in Chicago who lived in gray stone buildings with their family members like I did growing up. Fitness was at the top of his priority list. He was, very, very logical and very like internally wanting to, save the world. And he thought he was the smartest person in the room at the whole, at any point that he was there. And I wanted to take everything that I had and morph into this dude. And, going back to talking about my own perception of success, it was a massive success for
Oh,
me.
nice. That's perfect.
I feel like artistically I did everything that I wanted to do and some. I surprised myself. We surprised ourselves on set. And I can't tell you like how heartbroken I was once that didn't go to season 2. And I feel like that was probably a portion of my personal life and my career that I'm still learning from a couple years later, because if anything, it was the full package to me. And I thought like, finally, here I am. I've got the vehicle, I've got the people working with it. And I thought, this is going to happen. And it didn't. And that decision was brought on during the pandemic. So we were all already dealing with massive amounts of uncertainty personally. We had our daughter 3 months before the pandemic started. So I was at home with a newborn baby as well. And it took me maybe about a year to let go. I was like, someone's gonna pick this up. Someone's gonna do it. And it took me almost probably a whole year to like let go of Wilson the dream of Wilson completely.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's like epic that you can still, obviously it's very tough. You get to play this character where you feel fulfilled, but you smiling and talking about that experience, that's every artist's dream, is to have that experience where you can put yourself in work with people that you love. And I think that's just so epic. It's kind of like strange in the acting world how you can get this role and then it can kind of go away like that, whether you're killed off, show doesn't go ahead. I don't know, maybe there's other commitments. Who knows? Maybe it'll come back again. Probably not. But to have that experience is awesome. But I also feel like, first of all, year's pretty good. We've had people that like have never gotten over their character, and I completely understand. But I feel like, there was a pilot, I think, that you did called Next Caller earlier on in your career, and that only went like 4 or so episodes. Then you're doing You're the Worst, where you're like immersed. This is your life. You've had the best time of your life. Then you've got Living with Yourself, which you think just like being on a Paul Rudd show would go ahead. So I feel like that would have also have helped you realize that nothing really lasts forever as well.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Well, unless if, you can find those doctors and Living with Yourself and just, get yourself replicated, then I guess you could. It could last forever. But yeah, and I think in hindsight, it's probably better than not that things don't necessarily last forever.
Makes you appreciate it as well.
Yeah. But in a business where continuity isn't a luxury, when you do find those moments of it, you really relish it, because
Nice.
before you know it, they're gone again, and we're all go back to the same place. Like, is that the end for me? Will I ever work again? Well, deep
Of
down,
course.
yeah, probably, but who the fuck knows, right? So yeah.
Tell me about that, because that comes up pretty much every actor I've spoken to, that, you do something amazing and you're like, fuck, when am I going to work again? Because as we said with an accountant, you're going to work the next day unless you do something.
Yeah.
But as an actor, you can be in these amazing roles and you've had many amazing roles. And then you're like, oh God, what do I do? What is the balance of being able to keep yourself sane and that also look after yourself mentally or physically or whatever that you do, just so that you
Yeah.
can be you?
Ooh, well, I'm lucky enough that my family life first at home, like, my kids are hilarious little people,
Yeah.
which is nice, which allows me to move in and out, forcefully, thankfully on their part, out of whatever rut that I'm in, and my wife's so incredible and understanding when it comes to this, that she can sense it, see it, and just help steer all of us in a different direction. So like without them, it would be tough. But at the same point, not the same point, but on the same sort of token, like there are things that I have to do for myself. I have my feelings doctor that I talk to. I call him my feelings doctor. But I also, it's getting back to being a human and interacting with other humans outside of this thing. Like I have a trainer that I've worked with for a really long time. He's since moved to Austin, and we communicate, virtually. And so I get to check in with him on that. And when I focus on that, I get to challenge myself in a physical way that has nothing to do with acting, which is nice to get that escape from that. And I try to escape from that and give myself some healthy balance, some fitness, at least once a day.
Nice.
Food's a big proponent for me, like at this. So post Wilson, I'm 35 pounds over where I normally am. So then I had to challenge myself to get back, and what that was going to be like. That's a new thing. You're basically getting to like recraft like what you feel like in your skin again, literally. So dialing in what I'm eating, how much of it I'm eating. Not that I'm necessarily counting calories, but for me, the cocktail that works best for me is being able to just continue to stay focused on these things, eating the things that I like, but just thoughtfully in proportion, and continuing my
Oh,
working out.
nice.
And that helped me, shore back up and kind of get to a place where I feel best in my body, because ultimately that's really all I care about. No one's calling me up to do like crazy intense sex scenes or something like that. I don't
Not yet.
necessarily, I'm not, well, and maybe after this podcast, but like I've always known, like I'm not fucking Brad Pitt. When I walk into the room, not everyone turns their head. I understand, it's one thing that the theater school put into my toolkit that I'm very grateful for, is having a strong understanding of who I am and the qualities I possess, and accepting my flowers on the good ones, right? And like the thing is, I may not be a head turner like Brad Pitt or Idris Elba, but I'm a pretty fucking cool dude. And when you take the chance and the opportunity to talk to me, you're probably going to be more surprised at kind of how well our conversation goes and want to keep it going. And I know that I possess that within myself, and that's something that I enjoy about life. So,
Nice.
figuring that out and getting back to that, and human interaction, and getting back to my fitness and eating correctly, that like helps shore my mental and my physical side up. That allows me to stay on the straight and narrow and not wallow in my Wilson misery.
Yeah, it's still, first of all, you're the whole package, so don't undersell yourself. But
I appreciate that.
secondly, it's important, and what you've pretty much said is that, you felt it. You had huge highs. It's very healthy to feel it, go through the motions. And then while you're doing that, you're also looking to work on yourself and grow and improve. That's exactly, if I was to give anyone advice, you've been ticking off all the boxes. I think that's like the most important. Often we can sweep it under the rug and just move on or develop unhealthy habits, but you are
Mhm.
working on healthier habits. So that's also very remarkable. And after that happened, were you also not feeling good in your body because of the extra weight, or you just knew that you could feel better being where you were previously?
Oh yeah, no, totally. My sleep was off. Like my balance was off. It's being a very physical person just in general. Like I knew I wasn't as flexible, as physically capable as I had been prior, and I knew that wasn't unattainable.
Yep.
So it wasn't until I did ADR for Shotgun Wedding where I saw myself and I was like, oh yeah, that's why I'm not sleeping well. That's why I'm, not necessarily feeling my greatest. You forget sometimes what you look like, or and I said, oh, all right, well, this is going to be what it's going to be. And so I called my guy and I said, hey, I'm
Let's get
this.
checked.
Yeah, like I like this. It's November 1st. This is my goal by April. What do I have to do to get there? And he said, all right, it's not that difficult. Let's just start going. And we started doing it. And before I knew it, like it happened actually quicker than I got to my goal by halfway through January, right before February. And then from there, I just kind of kept on going. So like now, in my grand scheme of things, entering a new phase of my life with two small kids who love to run around all the time, I am trying to get into the best physical Desmond shape that I can possibly be in. I don't know what that means. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I do know I'm sleeping better. Food's tasting better.
Ooh,
And life is generally happier. And I say generally because, you know,
as
life is
was.
life,
Yeah.
right?
Going to say, I think that's a great reminder. Like I've gained a lot of weight and now I'm starting to slowly, hopefully lose it. And just saying, just like in terms of sleep, it's the things that you forget. It's a nice reminder. So I'm so happy that you bring it up. You feel more flexible, as you said, but just energy levels and also brain capacity, typically speaking, would all be so much better. And you said that in such a nice, encouraging way. And even just having the drive, plus you've got a really good trainer who's like, okay, easy. How nice is that?
Yeah. No,
Imagine
no, go
if you're,
ahead. Sorry.
no, no, we've got a no sorry rule, even though I said it like 8 times. Imagine your trainer's like, it's going to be fucking hard. Yeah, I don't know if you can do that. You've got
I
to.
don't mind. I don't mind being coached hard though. I like
Yep.
being coached hard. I like being directed hard. You know, it's funny when I work with new directors, they ask me, you know, is there some things that vibe with you that don't vibe with you, things like that. And, you know, I'm just always like, I have no ego about this. I come in with a variety of ideas, and depending on how many takes you give me, I'm going to try and do something a little bit different on every take. And if it's not vibing, I'm not going to get my feelings hurt by you being like, that was good, not right, but let's try this, you know, like, because this is what it is. Like, it's a Jackson Pollock painting. If I'm coming in with reds and you're throwing browns, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, hold on, I thought you were coming in with yellow to kind of complement, then we got to just reconfigure it. No one needs to have a meltdown. No one needs to have an ego trip. No one needs to run to their trailer and pout. You know, some that works for some people. That doesn't necessarily work for me. Like, let's just get on the same path and we'll try it again. Like, it's just make believe, people. Like, sometimes, you know,
I
people,
like that.
it's not as deep all the time. There are some things that are, some projects that are, of course, incredibly deep, but like when it comes to my point of view of them, regardless if it's a drama or a thriller or a comedy, like, all of it's kind of bubbling in the same sort of place. It's just which point of that bubble do we want to tap into more on this take? And I'll go there. And then if we need to switch it up, we switch it up. So that's kind of like the same thing with, you know, the training for me. If he had said, oh man, that's going to be a really tough order, you're going to have to work your fucking ass off, I would have looked at him and immediately thought to myself, fuck, this is going to be hard, but I'm going to have to work my fucking ass off. Let's
Oh, I
go.
like that. You know,
Yeah.
it's rare to hear people talk about ego in that way because we're all fragile beings to a degree, and sometimes we don't want to hear certain things. Through my experience, it's the people that want to grow and improve that are the ones that's got a good relationship with an ego. Obviously, there's different, you know, there's not one case that fits all, but you know,
Mm.
just you know, being on set, there's a lot of people, and if someone says, you know, good job but not the best, that can maybe hurt your ego, or just you've been on, yeah, no, go on.
Oh no, totally, totally. I mean, I think, you know, it's interesting being a director, especially on a film set, is hard because you not only have to be in complete control of the vision that you're trying to scope and delegate that to a whole bunch of different people who are all trying to simultaneously do their job to the best of their ability at the same time to complement each other. But you have to figure out a way to speak the language that everybody responds to most efficiently.
Oh, yeah,
And
sure.
that can vary from actor to actor, from, you know, costume designer to lighting design. And that's the thing. Like, you never know. You never know what people are waking up with that day. You never know what's like really going on inside someone's personal life and what just might be on the fringe that sort of sets them off. So it's a really delicate sort of balance. So that's why I let directors know, like, flat out, like, just when you're in your mode and you're trying to figure it out, straight shooter. I've always said, you know, the truth
Easy
is
to
hard
work
to
with.
hear.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, you're right. But it's hard to hear. It's even more difficult to say. But everyone respects each other in the end if that's what we're working on.
Communication's a very important value for me, and I like beat myself up if I didn't communicate to the best of my ability, but not in like a hard way. I'm like, oh, I could have just, oh yeah, yep,
No,
go
so
on.
do I. So do I. I mean, you know, we talk about mental health, right? One of the things that I've been trying to work on with my feelings doctor and with myself for quite a while is not beating myself up when I walk away from social interactions. I know everyone does it. Logically, I know everyone fucking does it. And yet I still do it. And half the time, those people that you're interacting with don't even remember what the hell you're beating yourself up about. And yet
Yep.
you're doing it for days after, weeks after, years after in some cases. And it's like, man, that's when I say it's not that deep. Just let it go.
I think that's so important, and what you're saying at a higher level is what we think we're experiencing. One, no one really knows or cares in a positive way. Most
Right.
people in our environment are there to support us, hopefully. And even just like from a communication point of view, first of all, you must be just amazing to work with. And I know that you only got to sound modest answering it, but that's the goals, to go to like the people that you work with, like a director, and just say, you do your thing, I'm here to play. That's why I'm interested in being in the field of creativity, because to me, it's all about collaboration. And as you said, yes, people have bad days, but we're also meant to keep ourselves accountable and be able to handle it. Obviously, maybe the odd situation arises, but just being able to like come up regardless of what you're going through and willing to play and take your ego out of it and do what's best for the whole good of the project. Oh, that would just be bliss to me. That is exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing. That is just, that's playing fun.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I appreciate that. And I'm glad that we're having this conversation and that we're like-minded in that sense, right? Like I think this is, a positive, a very positive interaction that doesn't necessarily always happen because people aren't necessarily open enough to being just capable of accepting that and admitting that to, other people. Like I was saying, one of the things about my toolkit that I got from the theater school I love so much is like dissecting who I am and where I fit in society. And as a big sports fan,
I like
I've kind of,
sports, so
yeah. Well, wait, before I jump into it, what's your favorite sport?
we've got our Australian sports, so you won't know two of them, cricket and Australian football, but I know that you also played basketball. I don't know anything about baseball. Let's see if you got a basketball.
I know cricket. I know Australian football. I've never played either one of them,
Wow,
but I have seen them before, and I think they're interesting. I would like to learn because I like anything that has to do with strategy, and gamesmanship has everything to do with strategy plus ability. So
You'd love
maybe
both
one
of
day,
them.
yeah,
When you
maybe
come
one day
here or
we'll
I
get
go
together.
there,
Oh, I'd
I'll
love
show
to.
you the ropes.
I've been wanting to come to Australia for such a long time. It's on the bucket list for sure. But I would like to spend time there. Like I don't want to just I want to spend like a couple of months. Like I want to get ingrained into the lifestyle and just really experience it as full throttle as I possibly can for the time period in which I'm there. So once that opportunity arises, you may hear a little ding dong from me.
That is, I've got which I don't even know if I can talk about it, so I'll keep it brief. I've got potentially a writing deal, and I'm trying to get it to Australia, but who knows? Who knows? So we'll see.
It sounds like there is fruit bearing over there.
Yeah, exactly.
But what I was going to say about about sports and understanding where I am, it's interesting because when you're in a profession where people constantly try and put you in a box, and then everyone else sees you're in that box and wants you to repeat just that box over and over again, that becomes incredibly stifling and boring. And I felt like my whole life I'm always trying to prove to everyone that I'm more than just this box that you put me in. Yep. Right. And as a sports guy, I grew up with Michael Jordan in Chicago, and he was incredibly deft at getting chips on his shoulder and using them. And I sort of developed that same philosophy. And as I've grown older and maneuvered my way through this industry a little bit more, I've come to the realization that in order for me to have the largest amount of success that I deem to be successful and to continue working at the pace in which I've been working at for the longest period of time, I have to have a better understanding of where I fit and where I want to fit. And where I want to fit and where I think I fit is like the best number 3 on a call sheet. Not that I can't be number 1, not that I can't be number 2, but number 3 seems to give the most variety and the more interesting characters, right? And I've come to think like I'm basically Scottie Pippen. I'm a glue guy, right? Like I'm a big morale guy. I'm always going to give you consistency and surprise you in ways that are going to be beneficial to what we're creating together. But I'm not Michael. And everyone says Scotty's number two. Now, Scotty wasn't two. Phil Jackson was number two. There was Michael, there was Phil, and then there's Scottie Pippen. And on the nights Michael wasn't available, Scotty's numbers would double and he would take the Bulls to the next level and show everyone, hey, I can be this guy when I need to be. But where I fit best and where all of us excel the most is if I'm here. And, you know, when we're dealing with ego and we're trying to deal with consistency and putting food on the table and, you know, all of those things, you're trying to figure out, well, where can I make this stretch the longest? And where do I feel the most comfortable and might be the most challenged? And I feel like it's there for me, especially as I try to transition from like the always centered, morally compassed best friend to things that are a little more darker, something that's pushing the envelope, you know, finding the reasons why, you know, people who the audience may perceive as horrible or bad make the decisions that they make based on what they think is best for their life and having the audience sort of connect with it. And so anyway, that's just kind of a metaphor of me and where I want to go and where I've been that is really just resonating and connecting with me these days.
I love that. And I think that's like great self-awareness and also like a good career and like mental advice as well. And someone said on this podcast, the best place to be is like number 3 to 6 on the call sheet. And I've been thinking about that for a while because it's not that you're not capable of doing number 1 or number 2. You certainly are. But it's about realizing that you can excel and knowing when to excel further and when you can kind of take a step back. But also it's that's like what I want as well, even though I'm not an actor by any means, but like, I just think that's brilliant. And, you know, you're talking about, as I've said 100 times, team player, a collaborator, you can kind of steer the ship if you need to, also be yourself. And then the last point, I wrote down another point in terms of the perception of yourself. Everyone on this podcast has talked about, and I know some people might feel it differently, and it's that being put in a box. No one wants to be put in a box. And from a career point of view, and but also more importantly, a all-around human point of view, it feels like you've constantly pushed the envelope of like working yourself, developing yourself. You know, we talked about like community and values and uplifting people. And that's the goal. That's like one of the key, for me, one of the goals to life is that we might not want to be seen a certain way and we can like be really upset about it and completely understand. But like you have constantly pushed the envelope with like how I would like view you like from a career, but more importantly, as a person, you're trying to develop and grow, which is tick, 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 tick.
Boom.
Yeah. There's not much you can say to that, but I think that's really important because from the being put in a box, how do you get out of the box? And that's a really challenging concept, but it sounds like you've actively decided, I want to change this box, move out of the box, create my own box. Has that been a constant on your mind? Is something that you've done? Yep. Okay.
Oh, totally. Yeah. You know, I mean, I grew up, I didn't see a lot of people like me that sounded like me, that looked like me, that I could relate to on stage and film and television, you know, so and the ones that were drug dealers, you know, doormen, which I've done all of those. And I'm all about earning your stripes, finding your place, developing and succeeding. And, you know, you think about like Jay-Z, right? Like Jay-Z's Jay-Z. Even Jay-Z talks about breaking free from a box, you know, like it's fucking Jay-Z. What box was he in? And why was anyone putting that dude in a box? But that's how I feel about everyone, you know, like I look at everyone, and because I know that the majority of people aren't necessarily forward thinking enough or actively forward thinking enough to be like, I can imagine you doing so much more than what you're doing now. I think about that with everyone else that I meet. Like I look at you and I don't think I would, he probably can't dunk a basketball, but then what the fuck do I know? I get you on a basketball court and you just go up and you 360 it. And I'm like, yeah, there you go. Break out of that box. But like, that's the thing. Like, so I try to be less surprised. And when people do things that I don't necessarily perceive that they, and who the fuck am I to say you have the ability and not have the ability to do this? But I've been fighting that my entire life. And so I've always been trying to show people that and also give them the same respect. Like, yeah, you can probably do way more than you're elevating or doing, right now. That's why, when you have guest stars come on a show and they're day playing or there for a couple of days. I learned this from Jeffrey Tambor from Next Caller, which was also a Stephen Falk show. I don't know if you know that. So
Yep.
Stephen Falk created it. NBC, we did 4 episodes. We were shooting the 5th one. They canceled it.
Brutal.
And then a year later, You're the Worst was born. So again, one of those things that like you think this is going to be it, and then it's not. It gets switched, right? But one thing that I learned from Jeffrey Tambor, and I know that because of certain things that have happened in his life, with and including other people, which I'm not really going to speak on, that his name might be like a hot button sort of topic. Yep. But one thing that he was incredibly good at and gracious at was making everyone on that set feel welcomed. Like they were there every day. Like we were all regulars. And I watched him do that. And I watched him just sort of interact with just sort of anyone and everyone. And I thought to myself, oh, that's the way to do it. Because if everyone feels like they belong and that their abilities are being seen, even though what they're given right now isn't up to their full capabilities, they're going to do the best that they can fucking do. Right. And that's part of being the glue guy, the good morale guy. And I noticed that. And I thought, yeah, I'm doing that. So anytime we had a guest star on You're the Worst, I went up to them, introduced myself to them, talked to them, made sure that they were comfortable, that they were feeling well, that they knew where everything sort of was, and that they were in on the sort of side chatter that was happening between the rest of us who were there all of the time. Because I didn't want them to feel excluded. They're part of the family now. They are a part of this show. And together we're trying to tell the best story possible. So if they don't feel included, then we've got disconnects happening, and that's not good harmony. That's not good humaning, right? So
that's so good.
And there it is.
That is so underrated. Oh, okay. I'm going to have to do part 10 because, there's just so much I can say to that. Getting everyone together and making everyone feel seen, heard, and we're all equal. That's first of all how we grow. And you've obviously got this like growth mindset, and you gave the example of not assuming anyone's ability, and so that you basically see the best in someone. And I think that's so good because, as you know, this industry, this is what you've done. We want to maximize. You've done that role. So we want you to stay in that lane because that's how that we can't, for some reason, see you outside of that role, even though we like speak to you on a like day-to-day basis, seeing that there's a lot of like to your personality, but you've done this one role and you did good at, so stay in that role. And you've been like pushing it, and to kind of go like full circle, I forgot what you said the play was, but the wrestling play, for example, and we'll probably have to talk about this another time, and that was also a bit of an underdog story and not being seen, and that role really connected with you. And then through that experience, you correct me if I'm wrong, that's kind of changed your life as well, and it gave you opportunities. And it's kind of like crazy how just picking something like that has kind of like altered your life, but also it's probably also helped you mentally also like just like be you. Does that make sense? There's a lot thrown at you.
Oh, no, totally. And no, you're spot on. I mean, the elaborate entrance Chad Deity is the underdog story. The brown Puerto Ricans underdog story. I mean, it's about a Puerto Rican wrestler from the Bronx dealing with issues of racism, capitalism, and stereotyping through the world of a WWE style atmosphere. And where he aspires to be something greater than just the technically sound wrestler that's making everyone look good while he hides behind a mask. He realizes his place within it, where he can excel, and how he can make everyone else excel around him to the level so that everyone can get to the place to where they want to be. And it was like a perfect blend of self plus metaphor. I never read something that like perfectly described my childhood, like
Oh, nice.
almost to a T. The thoughts that Chris Diaz has about political and geopolitical issues, like through Mace's lens, it really vibe with me. And then on top of it, like it kind of duplicated itself in real life. We got amazing reviews in Chicago instantaneously after opening night. Almost every night, we had different producers from New York in to see where the show was going to move to. Then we got to New York, and it was supposed to be on the fast track to go to Broadway. And then you had these people, these higher ups, these money people who tend to normally be rich white guys who don't necessarily
The
understand
art.
the underdog or brown man's sort of story and the way in which they need to go in order to flourish, and tried to start tinkering with it. And once the tinkering happened, we had like a real life conflict happening off stage that was actually happening on stage between myself and the EKO character, who is like the Vince McMahon of it all. So like what was happening on stage was also kind of happening in real life, and that fueled what was happening on stage, and that fueled me to get to the place where I needed to get to every night, to where all I wanted to do was tell one perfect goddamn story, and I was finally going to do it by pushing all of these fucking people out of my way. And that was the only time that he was heard in his life. And then from there, he goes back to telling the story that they want him to tell, because he's finally achieved that goal.
Ah, that is a crazy story of like what's going on with your life. But I also imagine that would be a healing journey for you as well, to go through all of that. And just as a side point, when you've got like, I assume big investors have now taken over or something in some capacity, it becomes all about money and selling tickets. And I know that the Chicago model is very different to New York, and that's probably, yeah, that's a whole story in itself. So, there's money, you're trying to be creative, express yourself. You are this character, you've immersed yourself in this character. Did you find it was like healing for yourself and that you grew as a human?
Oh,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, it was a cathartic experience every night. Theater in general is like that because it's new and different and live every night. And specifically with this character, I broke the fourth wall and spoke directly to the audience more than not, right? To bring them along as the narrator of this piece. And there were instances of things that I spoke about that would constantly remind me of my father or my grandmother, who had both passed. And I felt like every night I was bringing them along with me on the journey, and they were helping support me. So when I would get to these large emotional moments of outbursts, and then whatever happened afterwards, whether that was actually breaking down or not breaking down or whatever it was, like I was taking all of these things that I had inside of me for long periods of time and just allowing all of us to experience it while I was experiencing it, which I think is like the coolest thing about
Yeah.
theater, which makes me miss doing theater more than anything, because that doesn't always get to happen and or translate in the medium of film and television, right? There is a disconnect that happens because then it goes through an editing process, and it's not necessarily as give and take, or as live, which for that specific piece and for what I needed to go through to get to where I needed to go to, I just incredibly thankful that it happened the way that it did,
Oh,
because
nice.
it gave me that ability and that playing field to just have the green light and go.
Oh, that's brilliant. And last point before we do a rapid fire segment, we could talk about that also for ages, but you said it much nicer than me. We talked about at the age of 40, you were considering going back to culinary school. Given everything that you've said, and we've talked about success and how you've got your own definition of success, where do you see that? Is that something you want to pursue, or is that something that you've let go of?
I think I'm at a level of success that I want to be, that I think I could see this acting thing right out for a little while longer. I mean, culinary school's always going to be there, but acting will also always be there. But there's still so much more I want to do and learn about myself, and challenges that I have set that I haven't been able to take on yet. And if I didn't stay the course, then I'd probably have large amounts of regret in my life. And I don't want to live like that. Who the hell wants to live like that?
I know.
And in the interim, I get to, watch cool cooking shows, check out dope recipes, try and do it by myself in a self-learning process, in a healing sort of Zen sort of process in the confines of my own home and my own kitchen, and develop my skills from there. But it's never off the table. There's still too much more that I have left to pursue.
Great answer. You're in it for the long haul, and you can still do that in your own way. I think that's the best of both worlds. So I had a feeling that you'd say that, but you said it very eloquently. Just wanted to tie up that point. Okay, so what we're going to do now is to do a quick rapid fire segment.
Ooh, yeah.
So the first thing that springs to mind, but if you need time to think about it, then that's okay.
Do you want these like one word?
No, you can give me an essay if you want, whatever.
Okay, I'm good at essays.
What's been your special ingredient to work all these years?
Do you want the funny answer or the real answer?
The real. And you can also give me funny if you want.
Funny answer, weed. No, but the real answer, weed. No, the special ingredient to working all these years, the ability to be directable, right?
Well,
to like the thing that I was speaking about earlier about telling people, like, come at me with like a note, my ego's not going to get hurt. I feel like that helps me continue to push forward in the way that I want to push forward. There's enough egos to deal with. I don't necessarily need to get mine involved into sort of any sort of situation. I'll deal with that with my feelings doctor in the aftermath on my own personal time.
I think that's a good place to be, is being able to separate the ego. And, that's very challenging, as we've said, from the artist journey, because it always comes out. I'm glad that you keep yourself accountable. This is also a topic that I won't comment on them because I'll derail them. This is also a topic that we can speak about for a very long time. But you've mentioned in a few podcasts that you're a voice for the voiceless. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, piggybacking on something I was talking about earlier, I didn't get to see a lot of my people on stage, on film, and television. And I feel like where I grew up in Chicago, the variety of ethnicities that I have coursing through my veins, like, it is my opportunity for them and anybody who recognizes themselves in us, the possibility to see themselves in a deep, a funny, a heartfelt, and hopefully a respectable sort of way. Because that's only how the rest of us are going to get seats at the table, is if we get the opportunities to take everyone else who doesn't normally feel seen, feel heard, feel listened to, which might be actually more important than being heard, like actually being listened to, taking them, throwing them on our shoulders, on our backs, and saying, I got you, let's go, we're going to ride through this together.
I don't know, I said I wouldn't comment, but it's kind of like your success is other people's success, and you're creating a pathway where others can succeed as well. So it's not just about you, which is an awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Biggest pet peeve.
Whining.
What are you most proud of?
Well, I'm most proud of my kids. They're just they're they're like beacons of hope at like every. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, so like watching them grow and seeing them learn things for the first time, understand things, really for the first time, it helps me. It helps me slow down, and it makes me think. Like, I look at my wife and I'm like, yeah, we've done good. We've done good.
Once again, a smile says 1,000 words. It's just the best thing when you've done this throughout. The passion, enthusiasm, and genuine care that you have for like you and your well-being as well as other people. You can't fake it. So I hope people look at the video because it's been pure smiles. Um, biggest regret, if you have one.
Biggest regret. It would probably, I can't think of one like off the top of my head because I try not to live in a space where I do things that I might regret. Um, but I probably haven't stuck up for myself in certain situations as vocally as I might have wanted to before. Um, and um, and carry some of those along with me along the way. So, yeah. Does that make sense?
Yep. If you could go back into a time when maybe at that point or when you're first starting out, what advice would you give yourself and why?
If I'd probably go, if I was like when I was really starting out, I'd go back to when I was like 16 and just say to young Desmond, it's gonna be okay, dude. You're gonna be okay.
Amazing. Favorite character that you've got to play?
Oh, yeah, Mace from the Elaborate Entrance of Chad Deity.
And we've said it, but I'll just ask anyway. The character that you miss the most?
Oh, well, it would be Edgar from You're the Worst. I mean, Wilson from Utopia is right up there, but and it's funny. I've been having You're the Worst dreams lately. Like that was a very, very special time for all of us. And I mean, you could ask Heather, you can ask you can ask Chris, you can ask Steven, everybody down the list. They'll all say the same thing. Like, there was just something really magical that was happening while we were all together. And, it's not always like that on every project.
Yep.
And I would give anything for all of us to kind of get back together and get another shot at something, to be in the room with those folks again.
Oh, who knows? That's probably within all of your abilities is to do something with that cast in some capacity. It'd be interesting to see how the dreams walk comes out from the dreams as well. Last few.
Okay.
What would you do if you knew you could not fail?
Run for president of the United States.
That's a good one. Never had that one before. Next big dream or goal, or is that your next big dream or goal?
That is definitely not my next big dream or goal.
Just small goals. Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's not enough privacy in one's life once you've dedicated yourself and your family to going down that path. So that would not be the next big dream or goal. The next big dream or goal of mine is to find myself in this area, the arena of mastering the type of villain that audiences care about.
Like a Thanos?
Yeah.
That could either be a really good example or a really terrible example, depending if you like Marvel or not. But that was one of the more.
No,
Who knows?
yeah, I mean,
Oh, okay. We'll try and make this as quick as possible. I know you mentioned you received some hate from some of your posts.
Sure.
Do you have any advice to the haters that are posting perhaps negative things, whether it's to you or someone else?
My advice would be maybe don't be so quick to overreact. Perhaps try to engage in a civilized way, where actual real conversation can be had and each of you can be heard truthfully. I feel like that's one thing that we're lacking as a society, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, during pandemic. We all kind of stopped, hearing and listening to each other and just falling into a bubble that an algorithm sets before us. Like, when are we going to say fuck you to the algorithm and start saying, hello to the person that's actually in front of us?
Team human all the way.
Yeah.
Last two. Any advice you'd like to give to people who want to try something different or new, but perhaps a bit fearful of doing so?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Give it a try. It may not bear the fruit that you want it to, but I bet it will inform a different portion of your life that you didn't think it would. And you'll look back on it and find it to be a beneficial and pleasurable experience.
Well said. And the last question before we go we ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with you. What is the one question I should have asked you?
Oh, that question. Because that's the only question that I have no answer for.
Oh.
Yeah, I feel like I have the ability to kind of springboard and turn anything into something that we can talk about. But I don't think there's anything. No, there's nothing. You've been magical the entire time.
As you have as well. Before we go, how can people follow you, keep up to date with you, and all of the cool stuff that you're doing?
Well, the only way to follow me on any social media these days is through Instagram at Desmin Borges, or Borges, if that's how you prefer to pronounce it. I've pronounced it both ways throughout my life. I'm no longer on Twitter, or I haven't been on Facebook for a very, very long time. And you might just see me on a subway at some point. And if you do, say hi.
That's awesome. Thank you. I love your growth mentality, as well as this ability to want kind of the world to be a better place within yourself and others. It's a rare trait, and I think it's awesome. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll have to chat again sometime soon.
Appreciate it so much. Thank you for having me. And I'd love to. And, maybe the next time we chat, we'll both be on computers, but in the same room in Australia. And then after that, you'll teach me how to play cricket.
That'd be awesome.
I love Desmond's take on the no. No is probably the most common word in the industry, and oftentimes we can really let it get the better of us. Desmond has a beautiful and unique relationship with this word, and in fact, even uses it to empower him. His quote, "Hearing no doesn't mean that you suck. Hearing no means not this time." He also talks about staying the course and honoring himself. Sometimes it can be easy to stop or move away due to the negative feelings we may be experiencing from rejection. Desmond talks about how following his passion and love has always resulted in great things happening his way. My takeaway is follow and honor your intuition and your passions in order to assist you in moving forward. So I'll leave you with this epic quote by John Wooden. Stay the course. When thwarted, try again. Harder, smarter. Preserve relentlessly. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.